Manx Radio's Update with Beth Espy.
Well, Fastamai, good evening. How are you? Welcome to Update on Manx Radio FM, where we take a look back at some of the main news of the day, naturally also reflecting on what was a fairly eventful weekend for some. I hope you fared okay. We're going to hear from the owner of a Manx farm which lost a number of trees that were planted more than 80 years ago. Also from the owner of the Peel kiosk, who tells us how the clean-up operation there is going. And we'll have some advice on an insurance basis for anyone whose property might have suffered damage at the weekend. We will take a look at the latest weather as well. There might be a yellow weather warning, but the good news is it's not for wind. And if you'd like to get in touch, 166 177 or email studio@manxradio.com. We'll join Amy first for a roundup of today's main news headlines. Fastamai, Amy.
Fastamai. A yellow weather warning for frost and ice has been put in place overnight. It'll come into force from 9 o'clock tonight until 11 tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, teams across the island are still working hard to manage the clean-up operation after Storm Dara. It's thought around 200 trees came down across the island in the high winds over the weekend. Paul Costain from Morehouse Farm in Colby says he lost a number of trees planted by his late father around 85 years ago. He told Manx Radio they also took out some historically significant sheds there too.
They were wartime huts from Derby or just after the war. It is what it is. I mean, we'll do our best to save what we can.
Elsewhere, police are asking for help to find Ryan Neen. They say he's not in any trouble, but they are concerned for his welfare and want to make sure he's safe. The Vice-Chair of Government's Housing Board wishes she was more convinced by plans to set up a housing association on the Isle of Man. Anne Corlett says the proposals, which would manage social housing on the island, are due to go before Tynwald in April. She says it's important any association makes a real difference.
Why would we create another board, another association that simply deals with getting housing out of DOI?
To international news, and NATO Secretary-General says Syria is facing a moment of joy but also uncertainty after the toppling of President Bashar al-Assad's 24-year regime. Mark Rutt's calling for a peaceful transition of power after our rebel forces seized control of the capital Damascus yesterday. Train fares in the UK are the most expensive in Europe. A study found it's down to high infrastructure costs and private monopolies. And the Premier League referee David Coote has been sacked after videos emerged of him making derogatory comments about Jurgen Klopp and appearing to take drugs. The refereeing body says an investigation found him to be in serious breach of his contract. Those are your headlines. I'll be back with the news in full at 6 o'clock.
Thank you very much indeed, Amy. Now the weather brought to you by Manx Glass and Glazing. So we mentioned that yellow weather warning that Amy just referred to for frost and icy patches coming into force from 9 p.m. this evening until 11 a.m. tomorrow. The areas most at risk are higher ground above 1,000 feet, as well as sheltered low-lying spots in central, western and southern parts of the island. It obviously did chuck it down at the weekend, so there might be some rainwater still standing around on the road, so just be aware when you're out and about. Essentially though, it has been pretty dry today and sunny spells and pretty cold for the time of year, I suppose, but not anything too awful. But this evening and tonight will be dry. Those clear skies as a moderate to fresh northeasterly wind fall light to moderate. Minimum temperatures will be around 2 Celsius, so giving the risk of a ground frost and some icy patches, especially in those places that are sheltered from the northeasterly wind. Tomorrow, fine, dry, lengthy sunny spells. Temperatures only though up to 7. Light winds, and that high pressure is going to stay and bring us dry and settled conditions throughout the week. And it will turn a little bit cloudier though from midweek onwards. Sunset this evening was at 3:56. Sunrise tomorrow morning 8:27.
Manx Glass and Glazing can supply and install single, double and triple glazing. Call 674 573 or visit the showroom on the Snugborough Trading Estate.
Many people are struggling. You can help by volunteering or making a donation to Isle of Man Food Bank, whether it be food or essential items or financial support. Please call 646 999, brought to you by Descon Office Interiors.
A great night's sleep got even better with Zed's Bedding Store. From quality Beldorm bed linen and mattress protectors, fleece and woven throws to luxury duvets from the fine bedding company. Zed's Bedding Ramsey, next to Isle of Man Bank. Reach the Isle of Man's biggest radio audience with Manx Radio. Airtime, sponsorship and digital opportunities available. For more information on how we can help your business grow its market share, contact the friendly, experienced team on sales at manxradio.com.
For a wide range of wood-burning stoves and a complete installation service, visit The Snug in Ramsey. And we don't stop there. Kiln-dried firewood and full aftercare service, including chimney sweeps and maintenance. Call The Snug in Ramsey.
You're listening to Update here on Manx Radio FM. It's 5.5 minutes past 5. Well, Storm Dara over the weekend is said to have been one of the worst storms the Isle of Man has seen in recent history. Severe gales and storm force winds saw more than 200 trees brought down, closing a number of roads around the island. Some of those remained closed today. George Shimmin from the Ronaldsway Met Office is here now.
The most unusual aspect of the storm really was when it did eventually track through into the North Sea. We had this rather intense area of high pressure building in the Atlantic. As a result, the pressure gradient remained incredibly strong, so even when the storm cleared through, the reduction in the winds was very marginal, if nothing at all, really. And so that caused the severe gale force winds or gale force winds to continue for pretty much all day until overnight into Sunday morning. So, yeah, unusual, and in terms of the length or the longevity of those winds, unfortunately, yeah.
And in terms of sort of wind speed, sort of where and when were the highest gusts recorded?
Peak of the wind speed seemed to be early in the morning or mid-morning. They really seem to pick up between 3 or 4 at night. There's a noticeable increase in the winds, both in the direction when the winds veered to the northwest, and both the intensity as well, where it increased. In terms of the wind strengths that we recorded here at Ronaldsway, the biggest gust that we recorded was 79 miles an hour. Quite similar in other locations across the island. Peel Breakwater recorded a maximum gust of 82 miles an hour. Castletown had 77, the Point of Ayre 73, Brandywell had 70. Looked like it was slightly windier up on the mountain, but yeah, it was pretty breezy.
Pretty breezy. Yeah, that's George Shimmin from the Ronaldsway Met Office who was talking to Ben this morning. Well, a Manx farm says so much history has been lost after they suffered damage during Storm Dara. As we said, around 200 trees came down across the island over the weekend. Many more have been left in dangerous conditions. Now, Paul Costain from Morehouse Farm in Colby says he lost a number of trees that were planted by his late father around 85 years ago. He told us the winds also took out some historically significant sheds as well.
We've had some cedar trees, 3 cedar trees that were brought down with the north wind. Most of the trees on the island grow to withstand the southwesterlies, so I think it was a bit of a shock to a lot of trees that they came in from behind and blew them forwards. So that's why it's been so devastating, really.
And some of those trees were planted by your dad as well, weren't they?
Well, when he was a pupil at the Four Roads Russian Infant School, he grew some seeds as a young lad and he planted them on the farm, so he passed away this year, so he was 91, so I guess the trees would be about 85 years old. But we are planning to do something with the wood, maybe make a bench or some carving or some form of memorial to him.
And it sounds like they took out some of the sheds that you have there as well, which actually in themselves have a lot of history too.
They were wartime huts from Derby or just after the war when the RAF were based in Andreas and Derby. So yeah, they've taken the brunt of it. I'm afraid. No insurance on them, but it's not about the insurance.
And I think you summed it up in one of your posts where you just said so much history tied up in this picture, and it's a picture of the shed that's come down with the tree on top of it. And how does it feel seeing all of that history there and lost?
I know, yeah. Well, it is what it is. I mean, we'll do our best to save what we can. I feel sorry for the ravens, actually, because it's a colony of ravens. They used the trees for shelter and for taking a rest in, so they're busy flying around looking for a new base.
How long do you think it's going to be able to get things kind of back up and as they were, and obviously not quite as they were, missing a few key parts?
Well, the trees are nearly removed in primal sections, and the next step is to take the contents out of the shed and I guess see what we can salvage.
Oh, that's Paul Costain from Morehouse Farm in Colby talking to Amy a short time ago. Well, the co-owner of Peel Beach Kiosk says they were open as normal today. That's despite the storm damage over the weekend that they endured. In Peel, after receiving the worst of the wind, the west coast was then affected by high waves and coastal overtopping. Frankie Horn says they spent most of yesterday on clean-up operations.
So damage wasn't that great. We had the tent in front of the kiosk, which just provides a bit of shelter for our customers during the winter months, but this was just too much yesterday. It was 50, 60, up to 70 knots. The tent was starting to lift a little bit, so we decided to call in the engineers to strip off the roof and make it safe so that nobody was going to get hurt going past. But it was unusual, and we couldn't use the tent after that, and we couldn't open the kiosk obviously for the weather. But the damage wise, we're not too bad, but 30-40 tonne of sand out the front now.
Well, this is it, the clean-up operation that we're speaking to you on Sunday afternoon. All morning, you and the team here have been hard at it. I don't think I've ever seen so much sand actually on the pavement and across the prom here.
Yeah, it's colossal. There must be 40-45 tonne around the kiosk. We had family and friends down this morning. We shifted from one side, but it's pointless to do the other side yet till the wind settles tonight. We had one comment this morning where somebody said it's worth. It'd be better if it was snow. I said, well, it would, because at least the snow would melt. This has got to be moved. Somebody's got to move it.
Well, speaking of snow, we've seen obviously many times over the years cars being dug out of snow, but I drove past here this morning, and you can clarify this because I think it was you with a big shovel in your hand, digging a car out of sand.
Yeah, the lady was stuck. She tried to get out. She had somewhere to go, so she just got stuck on the sand. So we dug her out, and she got on her way. But that was just the start of it, to be honest.
You ever had to dig a car out of sand before?
No. I hope I don't have to do that again.
That is Frankie Horn talking to Ben yesterday while they were still cleaning up all the sand. If you go to the Manx Radio Facebook page, honestly, the photographs of the sand down on Peel Prom are something to be seen. So maybe you were one of the ones who was left with a damaged roof or broken fence over the weekend, and you might want to know if you can claim on your insurance and will that damage be covered. Well, former insurance expert and policy writer Malcolm called the Man in Line at lunchtime to warn people that it's not always as straightforward as you might think.
The good news is that it looks like the definition of building includes walls, gates and fences, but the bad news is there's a general exclusion for gradually operating causes. That's where they introduce things such as loss or damage directly or indirectly caused by wear, tear, gradual deterioration, climatic conditions, woodworm, wet or dry rot, mildew, fungus, damp and corrosion. Most people's fence posts snap at the posts where they have rotted away over the years and become weak, and the wind attacks that weak spot. There's nothing wrong with the wood in the concrete. There's nothing wrong with the wood up the post, but that's what the insurance companies rely on. Yes, you've got cover for storm, you've got cover for flood, but there is a specific exclusion normally in the building section of a policy which says, yes, you're covered, but not for loss or damage to gates, fences and swimming pool covers. There might be a third-party recovery possibility, and what I mean by that is, let's just imagine, and it did happen a few times, that somebody's flying trampoline comes sailing through and smashes into your fence. You could argue that the person who owned the trampoline was negligent because they should have anchored it down or taken it down or secured it, because it was likely that it could well have flown away in the wind, and because it has, it's caused damage. Now, if that's the case, you might be able, if you can track down the owner of the trampoline and they've got some house insurance, their third-party cover may protect them against you holding them responsible for that damage. But generally speaking, I have to say that 99 insurance policies out of 100 will not cover damage to fences caused by storm.
That is Malcolm, an insurance expert and policy writer who called in the Man in Line at lunchtime, and that might not be what you want to hear, but some really sound advice about what to look for in your policies. It's coming up to 5:15.
Manx Radio Travel, driven by Quayside Tyres and Service Centre.
Well, in the past half hour, the Mountain Road has reopened, but the Thalty Will Road is still closed to traffic. That's because of a dangerous tree. Traffic for the northern parishes can turn off at Brandywell, that's on the Benepop Road, or continue on to Ramsey. We know there were other roads. The Little Mill Road in Oncombe was closed earlier, and the Patrick Road as well. I'm not sure whether or not they're open yet or not, so just be prepared for the fact they might not be. There is a lot of cleaning up to do. Nothing else specific, though, to report on the roads, but do watch out for those icy patches because of that yellow weather warning that's coming into force at 9 p.m. All okay down at the airport, apart from a delay on the EasyJet flight from Liverpool, and all good down at the steam packet as well. The Manxman is due in, it says, at 7:45 though this evening, so it's a little bit later than usual schedule. It will be going back out to Heysham at 10 p.m.
Ask how you can spread the cost interest-free at Quayside.
You're listening to Update on Manx Radio FM. It is now 5:15. And does the Isle of Man system of prison and the way we train prison officers influence our prison population? Well, a spokesperson for the Howard Penal Reform Group has compared Manx prison numbers per population for 100,000 with that of Norway. So in the island, that would add up to 156. In Norway, it's 55. And Andrew Nielsen has told us there are marked differences between the way staff are trained as well.
It's an academic degree with a year of practice experience of being a prison officer as part of the degree. 2 or 3 years, I think now, the degree lasts. And that means that their prison officers are... they have a level of training that we don't offer in the UK, and they are very much rehabilitation focused in what they do. But they're able to do that because they've kept their system small, and so they can invest money in that kind of way. They're not having to spend all their money in just building new prisons, which is the problem that we have in the UK.
And what... this is an interesting thought, though. I hadn't really thought of this before. So what training do prison officers in the UK, and I presume in the Isle of Man, what sort of training do they get?
10 weeks.
Gosh.
So, several years compared to 10 weeks. And the only mandatory bit of training is in physically restraining somebody. Whereas part of the training in Norway will involve how you have conversations with people in order to get them to divulge some of the issues that they've been facing, so that you can attempt to steer them into whatever treatment or whatever that might be best placed for them, to hopefully mean that they sort themselves out and they don't commit crime. Now, that kind of stuff does happen. Obviously, there are good prison officers in the UK and the Isle of Man, I'm sure, who do that instinctively. But it's built in and baked into the Norwegian system in that degree training that I mentioned.
Andrew Nielsen talking to Phil there. You can hear much more about that in tonight's agenda from 5:30, which is all about whether or not the prison system here on the island works. 17 minutes past 5, current patients at Hillside Dental Practice won't be able to book an exam there for around 6 months. It's as it tries to cope with increasing demand, as Amy reports.
The practice was taken over by Manx Care last year and became fully operational in February. It's been working through the list of patients who were on the previous provider's books in that time, which has highlighted a number who needed extra treatment. Because of this, a temporary delay has been put on booking new examinations. The team is said to think that it will take around 5 to 6 months to see the remaining patients that were transferred from Portman, providing there's a full cohort of staff and depending on the treatment the patients need. Meanwhile, last month, Alf Cannon, while acting as interim health minister, announced plans to transfer all 5,800 people on the waiting list for an NHS dentist to Hillside. Manx Care says it's currently developing a plan to see how patients could be transferred when the appropriate resources are available. Work on a 4th surgery within the practice is hoped to start within the next 3 months, and is also actively looking to recruit another dentist. Both those things need to be in place before new patients can be transferred to the practice. Anyone already on the waiting list for a dentist should not contact Hillside directly, but wait to be contacted by the primary care services. Those wishing to be added to the list should either contact dental@gov.im or call 642 687. Anyone not under the care of an NHS dentist but with an urgent dental problem can contact the Community Dental Service on 642 785.
Amy reporting. You can find out more about that story at manxradio.com. Now, the Vice Chair of the Government's Housing Board says she wishes she was more convinced that setting up a housing association was the right approach for government. Proposals to establish a housing association to manage social housing stock are due to go before Tynwald in April next year. But Anne Corlett says it has to be done in the right way.
It is moving along. Something will come to Tynwald by April with regard to a housing association. I do wish I was a little bit more convinced that that was the way to go, and maybe by April I'll be there. What I don't want people to see is that we create a housing association as another body away from government, and really all it's going to do is take care of DOI's housing. Because why would we create another board, another association that simply deals with getting housing out of DOI? But I do think housing needs to come out of DOI because it's not in the right place where it is.
Do you think maybe government should be talking to the existing housing providers, particularly in relation to social housing on the island, or public sector housing, if you want? Local authorities, there are several that have very large stocks of housing, and they feel that the rules and regulations that govern the way they do their business is what holds them back.
And it absolutely does, because it is the wrong formula. It's the wrong way to do it. Absolutely. And more negotiation needs to take place there. But what I wouldn't like to see is that, you go ahead and form a housing association with the intention of forcing local authorities to put their housing stock into it, because they will resist that at all costs. And I can't blame them. If a housing association, if Tynwald decided that was the way that we were going to go, that then the Housing and Communities Board would be within that, or collapse down and that would take over. I mean, it's hard to see that you would need both things, really. And when you're duplicating, you're causing expense that you don't require.
Anne Corlett talking to Phil. You can listen back to that chat with the Perspective podcast at manxradio.com. Now, a team from the Great North Air Ambulance Service was on the island last week to further cement its increasingly important place within the island's emergency services provision. It has to raise more than $9 million a year to stay operational, gets no funding from the NHS in the UK, but does receive some support from Manx Care. Lee Salmon is head of operations and a paramedic with the charity.
The Great North Air Ambulance Service is a charity that's existed for 23 years now, and 3 years ago we came over to the island, and we came over with the sponsorship from the transformation team in response to some of Jonathan Michael's report into the island and its healthcare provision. The transformation team and Manx Care worked really carefully together with us, and we have managed to provide what is now nearly 3 years of critical care to the island in the most severe circumstances. And our teams work tirelessly alongside the teams here on the island to save lives.
How often do you get called to the Isle of Man? I mean, it varies from year to year, but is there a sort of an average?
Yeah, I guess it's probably in the region of about 2 days, two journeys a month, something like that. So it's not a huge amount. And again, I think it's probably good for the listeners to understand that, Manx Care pay an element of what we do in terms of a monthly fee, but they also pay an activation fee as well. So it's not like it's money wasted or lost. It's really interesting how they've set it up, and it's effective.
And it costs, I think I'm right in saying, £9 million a year to run. So where do the funds come from, apart from obviously places like Manx Care?
So one of the big reasons why I'm here today to speak to you is the community of the island is kind of come together, and in particular the young farming community, which is really good, and it warms my heart, because the young farmers are a part of a rural community, and without doubt industry-based, very important industry, and an industry that sadly has issues and accidents that happen every day, sadly, and that's what happens, and that's what we're here for. So the Young Farmers Club, the chairman, Michael, and his father, Brian, have been pivotal in organising a tractor run for us this year. I think it's the Children's Hospice as well, who's also equally sharing the benefits of this event. I think it's so important that the community get behind what we're doing. As we previously mentioned, mentioned, we are funded currently by the Manx Care, but everybody on the island understands the political issues that we have, and charitable funding is the best way forward for an air ambulance like ours, because it means that we can flex with the critical care needs of the island and of the people that we cover across our existing region as well.
That's Lee Salmon, Head of Operations and a paramedic with the Great North Air Ambulance Service, talking to Simon. 24 minutes past 5, we'll turn our attention to sport, and FC Isle of Man's manager says his team is enjoying the intense challenge of fighting for promotion in the NWCFL Premier Division this season. Now, Paul Jones's side's match at the weekend was postponed because of the weather, but looking ahead, he thinks his squad has the mindset and quality to keep up their charge towards the top of the table.
I think when we start to look at where we are in the league and the teams around us, then we start to take our eye off what we need to do to keep performing well and keep improving, and maybe we've started to look out a little bit when we really should be just focusing on looking in. You know, we've worked very hard over the last 2 years to get to this position at this stage of the season. You know, we've got to keep working and keep thinking about what we need to do to win games of football, and the other stuff can kind of take care of itself, really. So, you know, I think that they're really enjoying being in the position we're in, and now it's just about doubling down on our efforts of trying to improve as individuals and a group. And, you know, I've always said to the players, it's the team that learns and improves the quickest over the season that will win the league, over and above who's got the best players in the best playing squad. It's those that get the most out of themselves, and part of that comes from learning and developing and growing as a group. So, you know, that's our aim, really, is to learn quicker than everybody else and make sure that our performance levels improve every week or every couple of weeks, and then we have a chance of doing some really good stuff this season. So yeah, we're thriving on it at the moment, so that's good. You know, I think our performance levels have been pretty decent, as I say, the last kind of couple of games, and not quite got the results due to, you know, lapses in concentration more than anything else. So, you know, hopefully we learn from that very, very quickly, and if we do that, then we should give a good account of ourselves.
Paul Jones, Ravens manager, and FC Isle of Man's next match is scheduled for this Saturday, that's the 14th of December, at home against Stockport Town. And 2 charities on the island are set to benefit from a festive friendly, FC Isle of Man taking on the Isle of Man Football Association on the 18th of December. That match will take place at the Bowl. That'll be at 7 p.m. Tickets cost £3 for over 16s. They're free for anyone under 16, and they'll be raising money for Hospice Isle of Man and also Isle of Man Stand Up to Suicide. And just one more sports story. Isle of Man boxer Matthew Rennie suffered his first professional defeat on Friday. Competing for the English welterweight title at Wembley Arena, the island fighter was beaten on a points decision by Sean Noakes. Before yesterday, his pro tally in boxing had stood at 14 wins and 1 draw. Elsewhere in 2024, he'd recorded 3 victories already, all on points. So we're still very, very proud of you, Matthew, and well done, although that must have been really disappointing for him. We heard from him on Update on Friday, looking ahead to that match. Well, that is all from the programme this evening. Thank you so much for your company. Phil Gaughan, as I said, is here next with Agenda. His subject tonight, does prison work? Remember, incidentally, this month's Tynwald sitting gets underway tomorrow from 10 a.m. After Agenda, Chris Kinley and Chris Kinley will be here with Greatest Hits, and then Ian Cottier's here for Time for Brass from 9. Dave Moore has After Hours from 10. Whatever you're doing this evening, have a good one. Watch out for those icy patches. We'll see you on Update at the same time tomorrow.